So far, we have completed 3 steps to implement the status drop-down list in a template-driven form. In the first step, we defined the status data. In the second step, we displayed the status drop-down list. In the third step, we implemented validation. As a final step, in this video, we will implement the steps to convert the form data into JSON. I would recommend to view the previous 4 videos in this course series to have proper continuity on what is going to be implemented in this video. With the current implementation done so far, we can get the form data using 2 approaches. To demonstrate the 2 approaches, I have included these 2 pre-tags in app.component.html after the submit button. In app.component.html, I have collapsed the code for error-div tags, which makes it possible to view all the form element code. The first pre-tag contains the user property with JSON pipe. Here, user refers to the user object that we have defined in the component. The second pre-tag contains signupForm.value piped to JSON. Here, signupForm refers to the template reference variable defined in the form tag. We already know that this refers to the ngForm object. The value property of ngForm contains the values of the form elements. We are printing this object in the web page to see its content. This content in the web page represents the user object from the first pre-tag. This content in the web page represents the form value object from the second pre-tag. I have commented the display of valid property of status drop-down element which we included in the previous video. After these changes, let us see what happens when entering the form data. I am entering data in name and email fields. We can see that data is getting reflected in both user object and form value. Now I am going to select employed status from the status dropdown. In the user object, it retains the default status object with ID as 0 and name as empty string. The selected status object is not getting reflected in the user object. Let us look at the select status element definition in app.component.html. In the previous video, we removed the two-way data binding. Because of this reason, the status value is not getting updated in the user object. In the form value object, it contains employed as a string. If I change the selection to entrepreneur, we can see entrepreneur string as value for status property. Let me go back to the diagram. If we look into the status property of JSON, it should be an object containing ID and name. Let me go back to Visual Studio Code. This clearly demonstrates that we have not got the expected result for status. We can get the status object by including ngValue directive in the option tag with value as status. I explained about this directive in the previous video. It helped us to pre-select a status. Now we are going to use the same directive to get status as object. I am saving the file. After the page reload, I am selecting a status from the drop-down list. We can now see the respective status object included in the form value object. With the inclusion of ngValue attribute, we have successfully obtained the JSON data in the format that we want. The ngForm object associated with the signup form internally manages to collect the form data as we type and updates the value object. The ngForm object internally gets the form element names, name, email, and status and uses it as properties. For example, I am changing name to name-1 in app.component.html for the name input text element and saving the file. After the page reload, let us look into the form value object. We can see the first property changed from name to name-1. Let me now revert back the name and save the file. Hope this helps to understand from where the ng form gets the property names. Now let us see how ng form identifies the values for these three properties. For name and email, it gets the data from the value property of the input text element. For status, as we have included ng value, it gets the value from whatever is defined as value for ng value directive. The value for ng value directive is status. This refers to the status variable defined in the ng for directive. This status variable contains specific objects from status's array. We already know that items in status's array are status objects. This status object is what is picked by ng form and it sets into the status property of value object. To demonstrate this, I am changing status of ng value to status.id and saving the file. After the page reload, I am selecting employed in the drop-down list. The status property of form contains value 2, which is the ID of employed status. When I change the status in the drop-down, we can see the respective ID reflected. This demonstrates that whatever defined in ng value is what is assigned as its value. I am reverting back the code to have status for ng value. With this demonstration, we can see that we have successfully obtained the form data in the JSON format that we wanted. In app.component.html, for the second option tag, include the ng value with property binding having status as value. Include these two pre-tags to display the content of user object and form value object. After these changes, save and select a status in the drop-down list and check if respective status object can be viewed in the form value.